In our very first activity or in the coming activities, you will be gathering some materials ahead of time. No? And just like our very first activity for the upcoming activity, experiment number 1, you will gather, number 1, you will prepare a protractor, a ruler, and a tiny box, a small box. And one is, or the last one is the cylindrical paper tape or paper pipe. No? The paper pipe is, as you know, no, if I could let you see this here, no, in this small screen. This one is in your tissue paper, the one that we use in our kitchen. So you can prepare that ahead of time. So basically, we have to do this, no, in a way that some of the materials will be gathered in your house and you will perform it. No? But all of our lab experiments will be done in a group. No? So it's kind of exciting somehow. No? But one will always stand as a leader in submission of the needed reports and the requirements. So in every group, there was going to be a leader, and that leader is always responsible to pass the activity on time. No? When we set a rate of submission. And again, another one is a lot of that will be a joint effort, really. No? But in an activity that you're going to build, maybe you will, it will be performed by one individual. No? Okay, anyway, let's start with this. So welcome to the General Physics 1 Laboratory or Group Activity Orientation. No? Now, let's have our slide number 2. So for our lab orientation, we plan to group you no, in one particular Physics 1 class. The maximum probably number of students in one group will be 5. No? But of course, if your teacher decides to have a different groupings or number of groupings, then the teacher will just announce it. Excuse me. So in generally, no, we will have 5 in one group, 5 members in one group, with one leader as assigned. No? So one will stand as a leader, and that leader will eventually be charged with reminding the groups or the members to do some tasks, and that leader is also responsible for the submission eventually of the required output. Now, one report, or if it's a lab report, then there's only one lab report that will be passed for every group of 5. No? Unless otherwise, the limit will be set to a different number, like a lesser number, like 3 or 4. Then the same thing, one output for every 3 or every groups of 3 or 4 or 5. Now, for our lab report template, so generally we already give you the ahead of time. There's a lab experiment template that is already prepared for you ahead of time, and all that you will do is simply download that in your Canvas. So your Canvas is your learning management system that you are starting to learn to use. So you will download it there, and of course, you will fill it up and return it. So as a since it's a group, then there's only one submission, but all of you can access and download that particular template. That template contains the parts of the lab experiments. Now, there's also a rubric how the activity will be graded eventually, so you will see it in advance. So one rubric is made for a particular group activity, that may be not in the form of a lab experiment. And another rubric is how your lab reports will be given a corresponding grade. Usually, a lab experiment will be graded to a maximum of 80 points. But sometimes, it may also only need something like 60. But usually for Physics 1, it will involve something like 80 points. So continuing, so here are the different parts of your lab report, no, or your lab experiment paper. No? So the lab experiment paper again, no, if you happen to print it out, you can print it out, no, and pass it as a hard copy. No? But this time it can always be uploaded. No? Once you are finished with your soft copy or with your document, no, you can always upload it back to Canvas, and the teacher will be ready to check it. No? So it contains, number one, a lab experiment number. So the first activity will be called laboratory experiment number 1. Its title is precision measurement. So it contains these two things, no? Experiment number and title, an objective. The objective is in the infinitive form, and it is always something that we can measure. No? So like to determine, to evaluate, uh, to identify. No? So this is what we call the infinitive form. No? So the objective is the direction of how you will do the activity and eventually how you will answer the conclusion. No? Now the materials are already listed there, and in the activity probably that's the one that you are going to gather in your house ahead of time. No? Now the diagram is the picture probably that you're going to get, no? With respect to the activity that you just performed. No? You can get a picture of that and then eventually attach it to your lab report. No? Okay, do you follow? So I believe we will post for that. No? So again, objective is in the infinitive form. It simply tells you the direction of the experiment, the materials to be gathered in your house, if ever. No? The diagram, which is the picture that you're going to get for the actual setup. No? Now the procedure is taken from the demo that is given as a video. No? So ahead, there's a video for our very first lab experiment that you can refer to, no? Or you can access as soon as it is published or made available by the teacher. No? So when the teacher makes that available to you, you can access the procedure or the demonstration of the activity. And based on that demonstration, you can write down a paragraph for the procedure. No? So the procedure is simply the very first thing that you do, and you write the very last thing that you do in paragraph form. No? So you simply translate it. No? So procedure. No? The procedure is graded. The diagram is also graded. No? So you have to consider those things. No? Now, anyway, the rubrics will be discussed next, and that's where the points will come in. No? But that's the procedure. No? Procedure is done in paragraph form, and it is written from the very first thing that you do to the last thing that you perform last. No? Now, data and computation is the thing that you gather, no? Like in table form. And then eventually the formula is provided for each of these parts that needs to be solved. No? And with the formula that is available and with the data that you feed into the formula, you're going to go for the computation. No? So the computation also has a corresponding equivalent. So you don't have to miss that. No? You have to carefully complete the computation, no? In every available or in every possible trial. You have to do some sort of data gathering and the corresponding computation. No? Now, the next portion of the activity is known as the discussion, the observation, and the analysis. No? Now, you may break it down into 3 separate paragraphs, no? So that we can easily identify the discussion from the observation to the analysis. Now, similar to the procedure, this portion of your lab experiment will also be written in paragraph form. No? But how do you distinguish a discussion from the observation? No? Now, our discussion must be the principle or the theory that we already discussed in our lecture. No? You may refer to that, or you may refer to your book. No? So for example, the topic is about measurement, then you may be able to define, no? Or to tell something about the principle or the theory that governs the idea of measurements. No? So with that being written down in the discussion, then that constitutes the discussion part. And again, the discussion, observation, and analysis is the most heavy weighted part of the grade. So around almost half of the grade will come from this portion. I think 30 points. That's not actually half, but a little less than half. So, but this one is really the meat of the experiment. So you have to really do well in the discussion. So what is the discussion again? It involves the theory or the concept that you have to mention in the lab experiment. Now, the observation is the thing that you see with your senses. What you saw, what you observe with your eyes. Maybe you hear, if you happen to use your hearing. So the senses are involved. Our 5 senses are involved in the observation. So based on whatever you saw when you perform the activity. Now, lastly is the analysis, and the analysis involves things that you find from the data that you gathered. Now, one thing that we can look at our data is which of the value that you gather there is the highest. So the value that is standing out, the one that is really the highest or the smallest, can be stressed or picked out and given a reason. And again, giving an explanation on why is this value so high or so low could be an analysis. Now, another way to analyze is to compare. You compare 2 sets of values, or to contrast. You differentiate. So that's analyzing also. So you compare, you identify what is similar about them, or you contrast or differentiate. Is a form of analyzing. So these are hints. And lastly, and one final thing that we can also use when we analyze is when we predict a trend or a pattern. So if you look at your table, what is the trend of the data? Is it is the value keeps on increasing, or the value is steady, or is the value decreasing in some way? So if you are able to figure out a pattern for the several sets of data in several trials, then that's analyzing, creating a trend or predicting a trend or a pattern. So analyzing. Okay, so this is the part called discussion, observation, analysis, and again, some hints on how to do that. Now, for the conclusion, you may relate that with your analysis, and your analysis will jive with the conclusion and probably address or answer the objective that you have. So you don't have to make or write the discussion very, very lengthy. It may be brief, but again, it is always a way of giving a final statement to whatever you discuss, observe, and you analyze. Okay, so this is the part what we call as the template of your lab report. Now, here are the scores that you can get. So a total of 80 points can be derived from a lab experiment. So the very first one is the mechanics. Mechanics involves the neatness of the work. So if your work, if the logo is disarranged, try to correct it. Always present it to your members or leaders, and they will be able to examine if the work is neatly done or not. So neatness, orderliness of work involves 5 points. We call it mechanics. Diagram is the picture that you provided. So if there's a picture that I see and it's suited to the activity, then you'll get a 5 points there. Procedure is the first thing that you did and the last thing that you perform in paragraph form. So that's another 10. Data and computation, the solution that you write. If I examine that what you did is also correct, then you'll get a total of 20 points. And the discussion and conclusion involves 30 and 10 points, a total of 80 points. So this is how you are to be graded, and it could go sometimes as low as 60 whenever the data and computation is missing. So not all